we going to do this before lunch?
F2 is,
Skip 2-1, by the way, Mayor.
Yeah, it was withdrawn.
Oh, okay, understood. Thank you.
F2 is an ordinance of the City Commission of Coral Gables, Florida, providing for a text amendment and map amendment to the City of Coral Gables official zoning code pursuant to Zoning Code Article 14, Process, Section 14.212, Zoning Code text and map amendments by amending the following provisions. 1. Article 1, General Provisions, creating new zoning districts, multifamily 3, multifamily 4, mixed use 1, mixed use 2, mixed use 3, and design industrial district overlay, and deleting multifamily special area, commercial limited, commercial, industrial, and north and south industrial mixed use overlay districts, and making the appropriate zoning amendments to effectuate these changes. 2. Article 2, zoning districts, creating new zoning districts and associated provisions, deleting floor area ratio requirements in certain districts and permitting uses in certain zoning districts. 3. Article 3, uses, allowing certain uses in new zoning districts and updating telecommunication provisions. 4. Article 4, urban design and public improvement standards, refining public realm improvements. 5. Article 5, architecture, updating zoning districts to be consistent with Article 2. 6. Article 6, landscape, updating and increasing certain open space requirements. 7. Article 10, parking, updating certain parking requirements. 8. Article 14, process, revising processes for zoning applications, clarifying procedures for transfer development rights, and expanding transfer development rights, receiving sites to include design and innovation district. And 9. Article 16, definitions, updating certain definitions, providing for repeal of provisions, severability clause codification, and providing for an effective date. This is a public hearing item. Mr. Trias.
May I have the PowerPoint, please? Very briefly, I will update you and the community watching some of the issues that we've dealt with. Number one is that the zoning code 38/1930 has been amended many times. This is one of those times. I fully expect that the process will continue into the future. This is the way that codes develop and grow. Secondly, the code process has been going on for at least over 2 years, actually, and it had 3 phases. It has a phase of assessment and analysis, then the reorganization, and then the adoption phase, which is what we're doing today. The assessment analysis, as many of you know, because you had a chance to participate, included multiple meetings with city staff, with the bid, with a working group of interested citizens, and of course, with the commission. The reorganization and drafting took a lot of the work from our consultant and also from input from staff under your direction. And last time you adopted on first reading the reorganization, the actual reorganization of the table of contents. Today you're dealing with the content of the code. That is the first reading today, and we are basically at the middle of this adoption process. The second reading will happen as soon as you're able to pass the first reading. I had some attachments, including the commission memo, and staff provided as much information as we could. The new information provided by staff recently has been a memo that deals with Miracle Mile issues, just listing the different issues that relate to Miracle Mile, and also a revision of some of the parking provisions that were mentioned last time. And the city clerk has a document that they will pass out for you. It's fairly technical. It deals with a lot of minor amendments, and I gave you the raw Word document that we're using to review, so you can see the amount of work that takes place. So as I said, you have already approved on first reading reorganization. It will come back on second reading whenever we get a chance to do second reading for this item. Public notification, as you well have discussed today, is very important, and I want to assure you that we've had multiple public notices, including 12 times on the website posting, 10 times newspaper advertisement for different meetings. And staff recommends approval as the standards of review for this item have been met. And we're ready to deal with any of the outstanding issues that you may want to address. The consultant should be available by Zoom, I believe, and the city clerk could check that. She is. Thank you, Mayor. No, there's no more presentation. We're able to answer questions or help you with the discussion.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I just want to make sure that we address the concerns in regards to the residential setbacks, especially with a pool deck and everything in the back. I saw something here.
Yes.
You took care of that. Okay, that's.
Yeah, that was addressed.
Okay. Second, after speaking to several architects, there was a concern about the role of stories in the regulation of height, that they were requesting additional stories. There was a little back and forth in regards to, for example, if you're allowed 170 feet, but you're only being allowed 14 stories, they were requesting to be being allowed 16 stories. I obviously countered that the reason for that was to be able to consume as much of the FAR as possible. By allowing additional stories, the building height will be taller, correct? Or if you apply obviously the issue of remote parking into the mix.
In some of the less tall buildings, perhaps, in the very tall buildings, the ones that are 190, it wouldn't be a big deal.
So what was the hesitation in not allowing more stories within the envelope of the building?
It has to do with the quality of the space.
Okay.
We don't have a definition for the minimum dimension for a story.
Okay.
We could also do that. We could have stories have to be X in height.
Do you think would you want to review that? I'm not saying I'm in favor or against. I'm just saying, would you like to review that maybe between first and second reading?
Sure, we can do that, and that's, again, a policy choice, 100% by the commission.
Okay. Along with that, I was also made aware that ALFs, in regards to the unit density, is about 125 units an acre in the mixed-use districts, but there hasn't been a commensurate adjustment in the density permitted for ALFs.
We have not touched that, so what we have there is what's there in the code now. As a result of some of the changes, that issue has been raised to me also, that there may be some adjustment that needs to take place in ALFs.
Because, I mean, residential development has a lot more of an impact versus ALF,
Yes.
which again has significantly less driving and
ALF has higher densities because it has less impact.
yeah. Okay. Also, I know that some of the land use attorneys reached out to me and talked to me a little about effective date of the new zoning code. Needs to be discussed to make sure the projects which are already in the review process do not need to start over or lose the value of investment which has already been made in the new project development. How are we handling that issue?
We could work with the city attorney to come up with the appropriate language in the ordinance in terms of when it applies.
We certainly can work on language, but we need direction from this commission when you want it to apply. It's
So
going
when
to be
it's-
first
you're asking
BOA,
that-
final BOA.
I'm bringing it up just to say, so that my colleagues can think about that between first and second, because we need to have some sort of cutoff point. I know the manager and I have discussed that before.
I think
We have traditionally used the final BOA approval as the cutoff for the zoning code and the building code. So when you have final BOA approval, that sets your building code and that sets your zoning code. So that's what we have traditionally used, and it's a policy that has been going on for some time.
Okay, well, I mean, I just want to make sure we put that out there so that we memorialize that in this document. Because I think it needs to be important that we put that out there and we memorialize it so that there's no questions later in regards to where does one developer stand or not.
I think
It's very important to set that date because that sets
Yes.
the development, that all the codes, whether zoning or building for that development. And so that is a very crucial date.
I think it applies mostly to one project that is currently being reviewed by Board of Architects that is extremely complex in terms of the requests, so we can probably discuss this in detail with the city attorney and make sure that takes place.
Let's do that, please. I'd like to put that on the record. My last item is to discuss Miracle Mile. And I wrote a memo over the weekend, and I submitted it to my colleagues for their review and for their consideration. And I think it's something that, either we bifurcate the new zoning code and we discuss this item on itself, and we move forward and exclude Miracle Mile for today. If my colleagues are willing to do that, I'll hold my comments for another day. If they want to move forward as a whole, I'll put my comments on the record. What would the commission like to do? Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay, perfect. My comments are pretty simple. I'm in favor of remote parking, especially on Miracle Mile. I think it works. I think it's beneficial for the aesthetic nature of the mile. But let me be clear, there's a reason why there has not been a 6-story building on Miracle Mile, because you have to park the building. And it does not make financial sense to do that. It is already allowed to be 70 feet, 6 floors, but as a result of the parking requirements, developers are not doing it. in reference to other projects that have come before us. For example, 2020 Miracle Mile, that project did not meet the requirement for remote parking, so that we're not able to move forward. Now, I think, as was used before in this commission, I think remote parking is a gift, and it's something that we as a city are doing and hopefully will spur redevelopment. But I think we need to be very careful. I am not in favor of having 6-story buildings with a rooftop terrace and seeing these gigantic monolithic slab structures on Miracle Mile. There are significant benefits to remote parking, and let me put these on the record. The cost of a parking space in construction right now, depending on the design, could be between $30,000 to $35,000 a parking space, and only going up with the additional cost of construction, concrete, the scarcity of labor, the scarcity of soft costs. It's moving up. Second, by doing remote parking, you eliminate insurance, risk, and reduce costs significantly. That is a major, major plus for developers. You eliminate maintenance of the parking garage structure. That is a major, major plus for developers. You reduce staffing for the developer. You don't have to have a person cleaning. You don't have to have a person manning the parking to ensure. You don't have to have a person basically walking up as a safety person to ensure that nothing happens in these parking garages. You eliminate headaches on a continual day. What do I mean by headaches? As Kevin will tell you, slip and falls, garages breaking, ADA issues, just the continued headaches that his team has to deal with on a daily basis that a lot of us take for granted. It happens. So your staff is opened up to do a lot of other things and not have to deal with parking headaches. I want to be very clear, and I'm going to ask this from the city attorney. I want to put on the record, the building 220 Miracle Mile, do they meet the requirements for remote parking as of right now?
New projects cannot remote park in the 2007 code.
So let's be clear. By allowing for remote parking, which I'm in favor of, you're allowing a developer to take their property, which they don't meet in the current zoning code, to redevelop it. So you're allowing for that developer to take advantage of this new zoning code, which is fine. But I believe that we should be very careful about how we protect our historic Miracle Mile. Another important factor, by doing remote parking, you're allowing the FAR to be maximized, which, again, without remote parking, you cannot maximize your FAR because of your parking would eat up a significant amount of the height, leaving only a little bit of habitable square footage, habitable height, excuse me. Now, I mentioned the issue about why don't we have any 6-story buildings already on Miracle Mile. I think that we need to, like I mentioned before, we need to protect the integrity of Miracle Mile. I want to ensure that on Miracle Mile, we have step backs at 45 feet. That's important. With a minimum of a 10-foot setback at that 45 feet. And that is critical. I think a great opportunity that we have if we're going to provide that gift of remote parking, I think what we need to do is we need to lower the FAR and not allow for TDRs on Miracle Mile. If you put TDRs into a building, you're talking about almost 4.4, to be exact, it would be 4.375 FAR. I think we need to be at a maximum 3.5 FAR. And if my colleagues want to discuss that, I'm more than interested in doing that. That pretty much concludes my points on Miracle Mile. And I'd like to see my colleagues' opinion in regards to not only my memo, but my points on the incredible benefits that we're providing developers by instituting remote parking.
So if I could, all of the issues that you discussed are in the code except for the TDR, the removal of TDRs in Miracle Mile.
It continues, correct?
Right.
It's in the code. Yeah, I would like to have that removed with obviously the support of my colleagues. If not, obviously, then I'll have to reconsider my vote.
So regarding TDRs, I just want to put on the record, it's always been a conditional use approval, so no one should have an income-backed expectation that they would receive TDRs. It always is up to the commission. With regard to the Med Bonus 1 and 2, Ramon, I don't know that it's been removed for FAR. Certainly for height, which has always been consistent with the view of 70 on Miracle Mile, but for FAR, they're still available, correct?
Yes, for FAR, yes.
So I want to make sure, again, it's been a conditional use. I don't want it to even be a conditional use.
Sorry, I just want to confirm something, and I apologize. The area, the 3-block radius over off of Lejeune that we've talked about a few times, and we talked about at the last meeting. I don't really have a
Next to the San Sebastian.
name for that, but whatever.
The graph section
Yes.
area, yes. Sir.
Is
Yes, sir.
that in the rewrite?
It will be in the map.
Yeah.
That's the only change that will be in this request.
What does that mean?
The zoning map, the zoning map is part of the attachments. And the zoning map, if you choose to change the zoning for that area, will be included in that area as MX1.
But Ramon, doesn't that have to come back on second reading?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not on today's agenda.
No. What I'm saying is, maybe I'm not answering correctly, but the effect of changing all of that will be shown in the map.
Right. It's a map amendment, not a
Yes.
zoning code amendment, that will affect how the zoning code will be applied in that area. The zoning code is only now, the way it's written, is to allow for MX1, 2, or whatever,
Yes.
to create the
Yes.
possibility to develop MX buildings that was not before in the zoning code. So it's a new zoning classification that you will determine how it will be applied by amending the future land use map.
Yeah, if I could, also in addition, there's the second reading for the comprehensive plan amendment.
Referring to the comp plan
Yeah,
amendment.
That's not before you today.
The map
But the map is still an issue.
does what?
The comprehensive plan changes.
If I vote on it on first and second reading, the legal effect of that will be what?
The legal effect of changing the comprehensive plan, which is
And
a
that's the
separate.
other, guys, wait, this is why it's hard to,
I understand.
I'm not asking about the comprehensive plan. The item before me today has a map that impacts that area. If I vote on that item on first reading, what's before me today, on first and second reading, what is that approved?
If you vote for it on first reading, second reading, and also in the comp plan on second reading, then it changes that area to
Okay,
MX1.
setting aside
Or-
the comp plan.
Well, if you don't change the comp plan, you cannot do it.
What,
So-
what does it, why am I voting on it? I don't, I don't know how else to ask this
I think the idea is
questions.
to vote on the zoning code today, and then at the next meeting, you would have both the second reading
Okay,
of the
but let's
comp
just,
plan.
but what happens if we approve this and we vote down the comp plan? What happens?
Because I think the second reading of the comp plan and the second reading of this will probably be the same day.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah,
but we could vote yes on one and no on the other, right?
yes. And
Yes.
What happens?
What happens is that if you vote no on the comp plan, then you cannot vote yes on the zoning. The zoning has to be removed, and then it just remains as is. The zoning on the.
Seems like a
comp-
very strange and tortured way to do this. What am I missing?
It's, I would agree with you. I mean, it's hard to, even for some of us who do this all the time, it's
Right.
sometimes hard to keep up. But the basic issue is that the comp plan and the zoning have to be consistent. That's what the word that the law uses. They have to be consistent. So when you change the comp plan, then you follow up with changing the zoning to make it consistent. And that's basically
But
it.
aren't we putting the cart before the horse then by voting on this first?
No, because it happens at the second reading. So you already voted the first reading for the comp plan. There was a discussion about the policy. This is policy, this is up to the commission. You could say no, or you could say yes. I mean, that's really up to you. That was before you. That was discussed. Some of the issues were raised. You could raise the same issues on second reading. You may say yes, you may say no. I mean, it's really up to you.
To me, it seems premature, and I don't understand why it would come separately.
It gives you more choices that you can apply to that area because they will be in the code. It doesn't now say it can go there because it's
But it's
still.
doing more than just adding it to the code. It has a map that's saying this area, this
Right, but those are-
specific area
Right.
is under that designation.
The way I
for-
see this play out is if next time you
That's the
vote
next
down
one.
the comp plan change, this will have to be amended for second reading.
The map will have to be amended, absolutely.
Right, so between now and the next reading, you'll have to look at and understand what goes to the map. Because on the map today, it's single family and duplex, is that what it is?
It's a single, yes.
It's single
Yes.
family duplex on the map. So when you'll have to vote to change the map to allow for whatever type of development you want on that, whether it is MX1, whether it's MX2, whether it's, I mean, we're required now to step back at 50 feet on Lejeune because it's across from a residential area. All of those things will then be applied once the map is changed. But they're two very separate documents.
So I don't know if this is intended on coming the zoning code back on November 10th. If it does,
Yes.
you would vote on the comp plan first. If that is voted down, then Ramon will need to, on the floor, amend the map before you vote on second reading on this ordinance.
Yes, and that is, as I said before, that is a change, and that is 100% up to the commission.
Are you more comfortable with knowing and talking about that map change before you talk about what could go there? You want more of a planning study on that area? That would be the map itself before you talk about the zoning code? The zoning code is irrespective of it. It's not. It just can tell you all the
I
types
just
of things
don't
we
like
can do.
doing- I just, maybe, like, my sort of logic does not allow me to vote on something that has no, again, I think what you said, if I heard you right, was if we voted yes on this and no on the comp plan, then we would have to undo what we did on this.
No, because this is only on first. So
No, I
before
understand
second,
that.
this would be fixed.
But so
And it's
why are
only
we
a small
doing
piece
this?
of this, because this has 80 different items.
Why don't we
And
just?
that's one of 80.
Okay.
I think logically, this would have always been in the zoning update. The problem is that second piece that we're talking about now, the craft district,
Yeah.
came up after the zoning update was already underway, right?
Yes, in addition,
But we would be changing this map in this zoning rewrite
yes.
if that issue had not come up, even though it's currently single family
No,
and duplex?
Yes.
I think we either change the map now, or we change the map, assuming we pass that for the craft district. We either change the map now, you're trying to sort of do it simultaneously, otherwise we do it in a subsequent meeting.
It could be done in the future, it could be done simultaneously. Those are the two choices you have. And the reason why we're talking about this is that that is the only policy change of any consequence in terms of rezoning that is being proposed. The rest of the code doesn't change the development rights. So it's been very difficult to explain that we're doing a lot of changes, but we're not changing development rights from the analysis that the consultant or the city attorney or I have done, except for that area of the craft section.
If the discussion that we started at the last meeting with respect to the craft section leads in a direction other than simply saying it's MX1. So maybe that means that some of these blocks get something other than MX1. Maybe that means that we have some variation of MX1, or we treat it as like a special district. I don't know the answer to how to effectuate what we will ultimately decide we want to see there. And so I just, again, going back to the last meeting, I don't want to be doing something that would in any way impact that. look, I get look, we can vote on it today on first reading and come back on second reading and all that jazz, but, you know, but, I'd like to continue the dialogue at some point, and I guess it's not technically today that we started last meeting about the craft section and what we actually want to see there.
Right, you'll do that next
And how to
time.
bring that vision of whatever we ultimately decide we want to see there to fruition.
So Commissioner, I think one of the things that we talked about was a transition on Lejeune
Right.
all the way to the apartments, which, you know, yesterday I was a little bit confused whether it was 3 or 4 stories. I went to visit the site, and it is actually 4 stories on University. So I'm with you 110%. I'd like to see a transition coming down Lejeune, eventually hitting University. I'm more than willing to have sunshine meeting on this issue between first and second to have a conversation so we can talk about this openly. I think it's a good opportunity. It doesn't have to be very long, but I'm with you. I think that there's 3 different parcels in play here, and I think that we need to be very careful on how we address this issue. But I would like to move forward today. Just like I said, listen, I'm willing to vote up or down today on first reading. You know, I just asked.
That's fine, and
I just asked that we address
But
this
yeah.
issue with some sort of discussion amongst the commission, and that we also just obviously address the issue of Miracle Mile and how the commission, my colleagues, want to handle it.
Yeah, I just want to be clear about what I'm thinking, what I think other people at least have entertained, and have you guys moving in that direction as opposed to continue moving down the direction you started on originally, as if that is what we're planning on doing. And if we come back on second reading and now we're talking about it and we're telling you we want to see something other than MX1, are you basically starting over?
No, in fact, it's very realistic to do something different. We did consider, from the point of view of staff, several options.
Let me give you a hypothetical. You take the southernmost block and you call it MF4 or whatever the equivalent of the apartments is. And then you scale up as you move north on Lejeune. Let's just say,
Yeah.
I want to talk about it more, but let's just say that's what we decided. How would we then effectuate that at the next meeting?
You just change the map, right?
Yeah, and we could revisit the comp plan, because the comp plan is being changed to the commercial, the lowest type of commercial, and have some area that could be, let's say, high density residential for just for talking here. I mean, that's one option. Another option is just to accept the comp plan as is, and then just have some other regulatory issues. I mean, we do have that 45-foot maximum height right next to Lejeune already, so there's some unique aspects of the project. So
I'm with
now
you, and also in between the university project, the existing historic building, you have brand new townhomes too, right in that, on that block.
Right.
So I don't foresee, but you never know.
No, right.
Those being torn down, but I'm with you. I think there should be a transition and it should be deliberate.
So are you saying, again, if we came back,
We have a transition already?
if we came back on whatever iteration we decide, right? Whatever direction we ultimately give you, would we be voting that on second reading as an amendment to that part of the map?
Well, here's the thing.
Or
If
would
it
we be
becomes,
would we be voting no on changing the map to MX1 for that area and then do?
so there's 2 different things. On the comp plan, if you deviate really far from the initial first reading, you're going to have to do first reading again. That's the first thing.
This is the thing. I'm really not trying to slow any of these people down, which is why I'm trying to forecast to you, going back to our last meeting, what the discussion needs to be. And I just feel like the train is still on the tracks and moving forward as if we're going to MX1, and maybe that's where we end up. But
That's not on because the map isn't on today.
right,
So that's not on. It's
the map
only-
is on.
Pardon me?
The zoning
map-
map is on.
on first reading, and what happens is that the opportunity for you to say no is now, next time. I mean, you have multiple times to say no or to say something different. This is really a policy decision, 100%.
But what I'm trying not to slow people down, right? So, while also having a real discussion about what we want to see here. So if changing something fundamental about that is gonna then, at the next meeting, is going to then require you to start all over, renotice a first reading on whatever that new issue is, you're punting it an extra meeting, and you're basically going now into January.
At least December.
Right.
Yes, and that is one of the possible outcomes here, that you can do something completely different. But I think that there are several ways to come up with a middle ground that makes sense without having to choose a different land use in the comp plan. I mean, usually we think that zoning is what regulates, and that's true in terms of implementation. But in terms of policy of the commission, the land use map, according to the state process, that's what really sets the policy. So that's the discussion that we need to take. If you don't agree, if you don't think it's a good idea, you certainly can say no.
I think, for purposes of moving this along, this is the first reading, and I think we should pass this.
What do you want to do?
I don't-
For the next meeting, taking your comments into account.
That's
But we can
wanna
have a
you wanna
sunshine
have
meeting
you
between
wanna have
now
a
and
discussion on
then.
this?
sure.
Okay, so let's look. Let's-
Sorry.
Like, we could have a sunshine meeting between now and the second reading
That's what the Vice
to
Mayor
go over the
suggested.
map
That's what I said.
issues.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, so why don't we schedule that then?
so my point is, let's schedule a sunshine meeting to really focus on the craft section. We move forward today, and what I want staff, and if I may, Commissioner Mena, please interject and provide your guidance. I'd like to see from staff for this sunshine meeting, a simple transition of what they think is appropriate in that area, taking into account the historic nature of the building, which is on University, and, the setbacks that are required as per Lejeune, and any other issues that they may warrant as a good
Yeah,
opportunity.
based on our conversation yesterday, I have my staff already working on those renderings and so on. So hopefully, and in fact, the elevation from Lejeune was already prepared. We have a bunch of graphics that may be helpful, to you to understand the consequences. And we can also provide a range of options. I mean, this is not the only way to do it. There certainly could be other ways. So if you like some opinion on that, we can provide that.
Illustrations on the transition and such, but I would also like to see what we have there today, which I think is a disaster. I mean, little dilapidated single-family homes, and then next to a building.
Yes.
The youngest building in Coral Gables, 3 buildings up, and I'd like to see that too.
Yeah, I think and to your point, Mayor, I'd like to see various options.
Yeah.
What's currently proposed, what does that look like if everybody builds, to whatever parameters? I'd like to see a scenario where, again, maybe the southernmost block is, I'm using MF4 loosely, but keeps it very similar to the apartments.
Could be MF2. MF2 would
That's
allow
MF2.
that.
Here
And
too.
then scales up to the next block. I'd like to see, for example, what can we do to have more residential than ground floor commercial? For
Yeah,
example,
I second you on that because
live-work units, we've talked about that some, but I get that that's an option when it's designated commercial on the bottom, but is there something we can do to
We take
incentivize that, require that,
especially so close to
we-
Lejeune, I think it's gonna be very difficult, especially in this market that we have today. We have so many ground floor retail spaces open. I want to push more like what Commissioner Mena
But
said.
based on your direction, the live work has become commercial, so we
Right.
made a change in the code to make
Right.
it explicit that, so it encourages that.
So we're going to call a sunshine meeting, and do I hear a motion to approve this on first reading today?
Well, can we talk about, does anybody have any
Yeah,
comments on that?
well, we'll talk about it. I think that, I'm sorry, you started with Commissioner
no,
Mena. Are
go
you
ahead.
done?
I was done.
Yeah. I think I don't know that I view it so differently, but I certainly would speak to it differently. The issue of the development on Miracle Mile with the remote parking. We invested in the city $25 million into an economic development project on doing the streetscape in the hope of spurring the development and the private sector with the stores that are along there to improve those storefronts, to improve those stores. Now, it is true that, no one has built to the 70 stories that has been, when did that go in? The 70 stories, 70 feet. Miriam, when was that changed? When was that overlay imposed? That it was
2001.
70 feet?
And it was,
2001.
and then it
Because
was
prior
redone
to
in
that, it was
2007.
150 feet. So now it's 70 feet, which has been there for a long time. But, just as it took us a very, very long time to find the financing mechanism in order to redo the public spaces on the mile, it has taken us some time to also find the way to encourage the redevelopment of some of those projects on the mile at a scale that is appropriate for the mile. And I think when they brought it down to 70, everybody can live with 70, at least the people that have purchased property there, that's within their property rights, as they can develop to 70. We have never, I know for all of the years that I have lived in this city, served on boards in this city, discussed things with regard to the mile, it was always, always contemplated that there would never be parking on the mile because it is a pedestrian street. And the intention has always been to fill whatever is developed there with people and not with cars. So that's been a long time urban planning perspective on the mile. So, in doing remote parking, what we are creating is a tool to be able to achieve that vision as to how the mile will develop. So, is it a gift? Is it not? Listen, one way or the other, what it really is, it's a tool to be able to achieve a vision. So, yes, it doesn't cost as much to develop a building without any parking. On the other hand, a building that has no parking generally is not worth as much as a building that would have parking. So I think there's a lot of trade-offs. And it's not about gifting or giving or anything else. It's about achieving the redevelopment goals and the urban streetscape goals that we have set for ourselves and for our vision of what that street is going to be. So, I think you create a remote parking. Remote parking used to be in the code. Somehow it was dropped from the code that even staff was not aware of, right? You weren't even aware of that it had been totally dropped from the code when we first started talking about this. You believe that it was still there. And I think it was during the other rewrite, during the time when Pat Salerno was here and we started to look at, the remote parking and how far it could be. Somehow it changed that piece of the code unintentionally. It wasn't, it was an unintended consequence of the work that was done. So all we're doing is going back and correcting that. I think that, yes, you have in the code, there is a parking in lieu of that people will be required to pay. So yes, it will help support the, public parking within the city that they may at some time have to, may choose to actually lease or whatever they're doing. But it helps, our doing this is what helps us achieve what our vision is for the redevelopment of this strip. I think TDRs are always a conditional use. So even if I agree with limiting the height to 70 feet, you have the setbacks and the step backs are set. At that point, once you limit height, especially at 70 feet, and you impose setbacks and step backs, FAR is no longer of much consequence. So if someone, for some whatever reason, as they design a project, or an architect is working on a project, and they decide in order to build whatever they want to build, they could use a little more FAR to make this a better building, and they can do that through TDRs. I think it's immaterial. It has no consequence at all. And I think you need to leave architects the freedom to be able to design and execute great buildings for our city. Now, they all have to go through review. So if it is too bulky, you're not going to approve it through the Board of Architects. And regardless of what happens, if they want to use TDRs, they have to come back to the commission to do it. So denying its applicability there, I think maybe takes more meat off the bone than you really want to do. And I think you have to leave enough meat on it in order to encourage people to develop. Now, we know that we have, what percentage of the mile is vacant now is not only just due to COVID, it's been that way for a long time. I mean, even, they went through, even before they did the streetscape, you had lots of vacancies on the mile. Granted, a number of businesses went out when, through that process of redoing it. It started to come back. There was still a lot of empty spaces. Then we came into COVID. To make that mile the successful retail urban street that we want to view as the core of our central business district, you have to put people on that mile. You have to put people there. So you want to encourage, second floor retail does not work. It doesn't work on a streetscape. It never has worked. It never works anyway when it's on a street. So what's going to come above us is either going to be people working or people living. And that's the only thing that's going to make the mile really, for us to realize, our aspirations for that street. So I don't think you should bifurcate this at all. I think you should move forward. You should take it. TDRs are I agree that it should be capped. I think we agreed at the last meeting that there are there's no med bonuses, neither 1 or 2, so it is capped at 70 feet. There's no med bonus applicable because it would raise for height. Right. There's no med bonuses available for height. But to leave the rest and allow architects the freedom of design to present to you, buildings that may be very attractive and may work well and bring people to that street is over-regulating. It's over-regulating. So I would like to leave it the way it is and move the whole thing on first reading now.
May I respond?
Sure. Yeah, please.
Thank you. I've been involved in construction and design for a long time, and if anybody here can show me how height has spurred development, I'm willing to acquiesce to the simple fact that by building more on top of Miracle Mile, it's going to solve the ills and the problems that we currently have in regards to commercial. What we have in regards to commercial can be defined by incredibly costly lease agreements and requests, a competitive marketplace. I don't understand how removing almost 1.0 FAR would hurt the mile. I think what we're doing by capping at 3.5, you're ensuring that, which is something that you agreed to at the last commission meeting, and so did Mr. Devin Cejas. What you're doing by capping the FAR at 3.5 and reducing it from 4.375 is ensuring that massing is reduced, which is aesthetically a lot more appealing to the end result. I think we really need to consider what we're doing here, because we need to protect the integrity of Miracle Mile. This is our historic building, and take cues from other municipalities, like I mentioned in the previous meeting, Worth Avenue, Palm Beach, Charleston, Savannah, cities that have caps on height, and those heights are 3 floors, and they have caps on FAR. I think we're treading on some pretty dangerous, waters here, because, you're already allowing for remote parking, which it currently doesn't allow. So that area, which would be used for parking and which would eat up a lot of the FAR that could be included in a project, you would hit that top of the building height unless they came to the commission and asked for an additional height, like what happened with Gables Station, which we see the end result of that. When you allow a 50-foot variance, or excuse me, comp change, you see a massive building which doesn't look like it fits in Coral Gables. And let's be honest with ourselves.
We're not talking about changing
No,
the height.
but it is important because FAR deals with height. So, and massing. So when you talk about a vision, there's a very clear-cut vision. How do you want our historic downtown to look? Am I against remote parking? No, I'm not. Am I in favor of remote parking in every other areas with the additional TDRs? Completely. It's not a concern. But our historic Miracle Mile should be preserved. It should look something beautiful, low scale, and we should do everything in our power to preserve that area in perpetuity. We really need to think about what we're going to do today, because if we don't bifurcate, like Commissioner Keon said, this legislation, I won't vote in favor of it, even though I may be in favor of a lot of different things that are being proffered here in this zoning code rewrite. But I'd like to see that I could vote in favor of a lot of the corrections that are being made here, which I think are in the benefit of this community as a whole.
And I would just say, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, but I just want to say it's not because of what you just said. The last part about that you won't vote for it if we don't. Before you even started speaking, I was going to say, to me, both this issue in particular, Miracle Mile, and to a lesser degree, but still a significant degree, the whole issue with that craft section, to me are clearly the most two significant issues of interest and of public interest in this rewrite. And I feel like, frankly, they should both be bifurcated, because I think they merit that. These are very significant decisions that are impacting key areas of the city in a significant way, regardless of what one thinks should happen there or not. It's hard to justify having it in this zoning code rewrite, which, as far as I recall, when we started down this path, we're going to clean things up in the code and this, that, and the other. And these two, compared to everything else, to me are pretty significant. So that would be my gut. And I don't mind, by the way, like procedurally, Miriam would have to guide us, but I'm happy to vote either one or both ahead on first reading, but I would separate it and vote on it on first reading and treat it separately. If I heard correctly and if I understood correctly, going back to the craft section issue, the zoning map issue as it relates to the craft section would not have been part of the zoning code rewrite, but for the separate discussion about the comp plan that's being proposed, right?
Yes.
So it kind of got put in here, even though it wasn't supposed to be in here. And I'm assuming that was just to streamline things, and I appreciate that. I get it. But it's really its own issue, that craft section. Both its zoning and its comp plan are its own standalone issue. That shouldn't really be part of the zoning rewrite with all this other stuff about, pools and all these other non-controversial items that most people are perfectly fine with and that we're not even discussing.
We're actually doing a favor.
Yeah.
We could move that forward.
To me, these two issues are really important, and I think they should be their own standalone items, frankly. And again, I'm happy to vote for them both on first reading today as separate items. I don't know if we can do that. Can we separate and vote on first reading on those items?
So here's what I would say. First, you should have a motion on each to bifurcate craft section, see if that passes, to bifurcate Miracle Mile, see if that passes. And then at that point, you can vote on all three on first, because all three are advertised in this zoning code.
That makes sense to me. I would propose to bifurcate both of anything relating to the craft section discussion that we're having, however you describe that in here, and the Miracle Mile issues.
The craft section is a change of zoning and change of land use, which is very clear. I mean, that's something that we can define.
So I make a motion to bifurcate those two issues as standalone items.
We have somebody who wishes to speak, enter the jury, and this is a public hearing.
This is a Yurre. How are you, sir? You've been here a while.
Been here the whole morning.
Brief as possible. Anthony DeUri, 1450 Brickell Avenue. I know people want to go to lunch, and I know the one good thing about COVID is you didn't have to see lawyers that often. So I'm sorry, we're back to some extent. I just want to make a couple of comments in regards to the zoning code changes that were proposed. In particular, some of them were already discussed here today. The comment about grandfathering, or at least the projects that are in the pipeline. I have a project, I think it's the one that's been referenced by Ramon, that we've spent significant amount of time and resources on. And in particular, the city, Mr. Devon Cejas has been working with Ramon to create a better process that creates more work up front, but ultimately a more streamlined application for the city. And so to make life easy for everybody, I think that somewhere around the DRC, if you've applied and gotten past them to apply to DRC, or gotten past DRC, that's probably a good place where somebody's invested enough money on it, and they're not running to the steps of the court, so to speak, to try to get something in. Maybe you want to create a cutoff that people don't sit on their rights, but that's where I would hopefully suggest that the policy falls on. And then there is a block that I did a zoning analysis on a couple of years ago. I do not represent anyone on this block, but it is the block between, on the north, Almeria and Sevilla on the south, Ponce on the west, and Galeano on the east. It's essentially the block, the CBD cuts off at the north of the block in Almeria, and the plaza, it starts on the south side on Sevilla. So you have a block there that's just going to be left as a gap in limbo between the CBD and the plaza. And about 70% of the block is mid-rise commercial, 15% of the block is low-rise commercial, and then there's this very bizarre 7 or 8 lots that are high-density residential. I think that block is great to be redeveloped. It's a bunch of commercial parking lots. It's where the AmSouth or AmTrust building is, and we should look at finding a
Palmerita?
it's the corner, it's on Ponce, Almeria on the north, Sevilla on the south, and Galeano on the east. It's where the AmSouth or AmTrust building is.
Yeah, I thought it was Palermo,
Yeah,
one of those streets.
Yeah, it's a bunch of bank teller parking lots. It's an opportunity there where you're going to do all this great work to create mixed-use environments, and that block is just kind of going to fall through the cracks.
I think the building that you're talking about facing Ponce is actually historic.
It was built in 1984.
It looks that way.
I know. It was a surprise to me when I did the zoning analysis when the purchasers, my then clients, went and purchased it. I just happened to have this knowledge, and I saw it's just falling as a gap between the CBD and the plaza. And it's an opportunity where it's a block that's just all commercial parking lots, and it's just perfect to be taken to a better use, especially being around Ponce Circle Park and the amount of money the city's going to invest in that area. So I would suggest if you can look at that block. And then the last comment I wanted to make was just in regards to something that's being changed that is going to apply to all property in the city of Coral Gables, which is the definition of a floor area ratio. The city's operated under certain guidelines regarding what things are included in FAR and not included in FAR for items that are back of house. And for the most part, those items have been reviewed and included in the new definition of FAR. I would just like to make the following comment, and I don't want to necessarily disagree with it, but there were 4 items that were left out, and I would just lend my knowledge on it. The items are mail rooms, loading areas, service corridors, and storage. And I can tell you to create mixed-use environments and mixed-use buildings, sometimes you need those corridors and loading areas to make the different uses work together, the office with the residential, the commercial. The mail rooms, Amazon requires mailroom space today in a different way than it did before. And then lastly, storage. If you want to make these residences to come downtown, they're downsizing from their Gables homes. So storage is something that they're going to need. Ultimately, what happens is these are not specific uses, but the use requires it as an ancillary basis, which is why, again, we can get into a whole discussion about it, but I want to be respectful of your time. Maybe there creates some flexibility there because we do need storage for the mixed-use concept. We need these corridors, and it'll just eat into the ability to create enough units to make a project viable in certain instances. Those are all the comments I wanted to make, and just thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We had spoken previously, Madam City Attorney, about the first item that Mr. DeUre mentioned about
Cutoff?
how you deal with projects that are already in the pipeline, what your cutoff point is. My recollection was we talked about it being DRC, but I don't recall if we took action on that, if that's currently in there that way, how we're proposing to handle that aspect of it.
Commissioner,
Not
we,
taken action. The typical way that the city's done it in the past is in final BOA. The industry's asking for DRC, that's obviously a different ask. It's up to you when you apply.
And the other,
We have
really
tradition-
quick, Peter, before you dive into it, just so you can address this as well. The other aspect of it that I recall, that I believe I brought up, was having a expiration, for lack of a better word. In other words, that you can't just sit on that submitted project for excessive amount of time, that there be some amount of time by which you have to proceed with your approvals or revert to the new, zoning.
And also, what is common practice in regards to other cities, or what are they doing?
the DRC cannot be used to vest the building code. We have traditionally used a final BOA where the project is defined. The DRC is a very preliminary review for that project, which basically provides the developer pitfalls that can occur. You don't have sewer, you have water issues, et cetera. The final BOA has been traditionally what we have used to vest the building code and the zoning code. The building code cannot be vested with the DRC. I think the zoning code is interesting, but I think that's what we've been doing. The BOA, the final BOA. At that point, there is a fee. At that point, there is an establishment of the project, and I do not believe that the DRC should be the vesting for any of our codes. The final Board of Architect is good for 18 months. The building code is good for 6 months, 180 days. And that's what traditionally is the application process as far as BOA and as far as the building code.
But is it baked into that if they don't get whatever approvals are necessary in that time period? What happens with vis-a-vis their zoning rights?
The BOA expires, and then the building code expires at 180 days. So you'd be under whatever building code is in effect after the expiration. And then the zoning expires 18 months after that, the BOA approval. So at that point, you would be under the new zoning code. So you have basically 18 months for the zoning and 6 months for the building code.
And I'm assuming that those deadlines get extended if there's any delay on the city side for some reason, or you have to go back to the drawing board on some aspect of the project.
Once you submit for the master permit, then that's a whole different scenario. Once you submit for master permit, as long as that permit proceeds and you get approvals, then you're extended 180 days per every approval.
Okay.
So if you don't get any approvals in 180 days, your permit expires.
It's just like inspections.
But
You
that's
gotta-
6 months.
You gotta
should
call for
be-
inspection.
If you can't get an approval in 6 months, and there's something, after you submit for, so it can be any approval, it can be plumbing, building, whatever. That permit is extended by the Florida Building Code. And if you extend it by the Florida Building Code, you're automatically extending the zoning code.
For whatever it's worth, Commissioner Mena, I believe it was at the first Sunshine meeting I ever attended. I also recall that we had discussed DRC. that
Yeah, it was a
one
while
time,
back
and we
now.
never discussed it again, I don't think.
I don't,
The-
I'm not here to tell you guys when it should be,
Yeah, the main issue is that the building code
No,
changes.
I am, but I defer to their judgment on when the appropriate time is. But I think it is important that you do have an established,
Absolutely,
you know,
It was final BO.
The building code will change
BOA.
many more times when compared to the zoning code. The last time the zoning code changed significantly was about 10 years ago. In the meantime, several times the building code has been amended, so that's the reason for that.
The building code commissioner has approximately a 3-year cycle time, approximately.
okay. Mr. Diore, do you, just from
Yeah, just
a
to,
practitioner's perspective,
Yeah,
what are your
just-
thoughts on those?
yeah, to speak to that point, you know, the building code is one thing. I'm really speaking in regards to the zoning code that is being amended today. It's just impossible, all the hypotheticals and permutations of it and how it'll apply to every single piece of property. And so my request is, if you go to the final BOA, that's essentially, you've gotten a set of CDs and you're going for your building permit.
No, that's not CDs, that's design development. You're not at the CD stage, you should not be at the CD stage when you go final BO. Final BOA is your design is finished. CDs, construction documents, are not done prior to final BOA. So let's look at that. When you go to final BOA, your design, you're asking your design to be approximately finished. You're not going into construction documents because you don't have a project approved yet. So construction documents are totally separate. You're still in design development, and I think that's very clear.
To your knowledge, working in other municipalities, what is their cutoff that you've seen applied?
When it comes to the building code, it's in regards to it's perfectly clear, the law, it's a permanent application for the building
I think
code.
they're talking about the zoning code.
But the zoning code, it really depends on the particular municipality and how much is vested in different stages of the approval process. I will tell you that there is DRC, then there's Board of Architects initial review, at which staff is already providing reports to BOA and recommendations for the project, and then BOA votes on that initial preliminary review. Then after that, there's planning and zoning. After that, there's historic. But at that point in time, after that preliminary BOA, all the consultant work in terms of traffic, in terms of design, in terms of zoning, is, you're in the several hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it's fully baked after you finish that preliminary BOA review. Between the preliminary and the other ones, you're making tweaks to the project, and you're providing, as the city manager said, you're not doing a CD, but you're doing more. You're going further into design drawing of what was approved by all the different disciplines at DRC, and then subsequently with BOA for the design of the building, where staff recommendation or not is required at that point in time.
Do you need final construction documents for final BOA or no? Sorry, I just want to be
No,
clear on that.
it's a matter of timing, because once you go and again, I will say that in the instance that most recently that the process has been, it's being streamlined right now, so more work is done before DRC than later phases having to make huge changes to the project. So once I get out of BOA, that preliminary BOA, the way that it's proposed to continue to be done now, you have a staff review of the project, a review of every discipline in the city of the project, and you have baked the project that you're moving forward with, unless planning and zoning or the commission rejects it.
Yes, but Commissioner, your answer is no. Construction documents are not done before BOA.
Yeah, no, of course.
You're
Yeah,
still
no.
designing the building, you come for a preliminary review, you discuss it with the Board of Architects, they come up with their comments, you try to incorporate some of their comments into your design, you get your final BOA approval, and then at that point, you finish your design development drawings and you go into construction documents. So the answer is no. There's no design development drawings done prior to BOA.
There's just a big gap between the preliminary BOA and the final BOA. And once you get past the preliminary BOA, you do have a pretty well-baked project where every single city staff and department has commented on, and that's what you're moving forward with, unless planning and zoning or the commission does not agree with the project. In other words, I mean, Mr. Cejas can comment on the process as well, but there's, I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars at that point in time are expended from
Isn't that the point?
the
You're
review
really-
process.
At the end of the day, setting aside the technical answer to the question, isn't the real point that after preliminary BOA, heading towards final BOA, that you're investing significant amount of sums at that point in time to flesh out the project and obtain final BOA approval?
That would be, those would be the final steps, would be planning and zoning.
2 points of clarification,
But I
if
mean,
may.
again, there could be potentially significant changes at PZAB along with the commission. I mean, we've seen projects that have come here, like the one that I mentioned before, that had, you know, a comp change that included a 50-foot height increase to a project. So, and that goes up to the commission for a vote, and you don't want to embark on CDs, construction documents, before you have those approvals, because if not, I mean, again, you're betting on whether your approvals are going to be.
The fundamental.
If I may clarify,
The context of the discussion, though, I just don't want to lose sight of it, is if you're on that path and you're at that part of the process, and now you change the zoning on a given project,
I'm going back to step one
how
potentially.
prejudicial is that
Well,
to people?
If we may,
Let me say something, let me
Isn't that
say
the- isn't
something.
that the discussion
Let me
we're
say
having?
something concerning development, construction and actual drawings. One is, if you do preliminary design, you can submit anything, just to get preliminary design and get vested. It can be any kind of, it can be wrong zoning, whatever. If if you know that the zoning code is going to change and is going to affect you, then as an architect and as a developer, you need to make sure that you submit drawings that are accurate, correct, and approved before that zoning code change. That's part of what you do. If not, then what you could do is submit anything, and that project is vested in the prior zoning code. And when you have a final BOA approval, that's a substantial approval. It truly defines the building, and I think it creates the actual vesting. And we've been using it for the building code and for the zoning code, because there is an expectation that a lot of that the final work has been done, and you're getting ready to finish your design development and get into construction documents. The final BOA doesn't mean the building's complete design. It does not. It does not. There's quite a bit of work is still in design development to do, right? Even before you get to CDs is what I'm trying to say. So that overall concept is approved by the Board of Architects. You finish your design development, because now you have the final BOA approval. You finish design development drawings, and then you proceed into construction documents, and then you come back and so it is a very substantial approval at that time. So.
Devin, you were going to say something?
yeah, just to follow up on what the manager just stated and just further clarification on a couple of the points that Mr. DeJury was mentioning. Final BOA, as the manager is referencing this, is through the preliminary process. And once you obtain that final, then you're able to move forward in the process of planning and zoning, conditional uses, and yes, there might be some minor modifications that need to be done when that project needs to return back to permitting. At that time, the city architect will verify to make certain that the plans are to the approval done at that final board meeting during the preliminary process. At that time, that approval grants you 18 months of vested rights, which can be then, by the city architect, extended, I believe, for another year, and then further extended for another year by city commission through the, I believe, the director's recommendation. So there is already a process for vetting a BOA final approval through the AB preliminary process. Okay. Per the code, it's very difficult to affirm any projects at DRC. As a DRC chairperson, projects reviewed at DRC are solely technical to give guidance to get prepared for BOA and further boards, and a statement that is made at every DRC meeting, no approvals are granted at that meeting. So by somehow making that approval or stating that going to DRC grants some rights, it's define what's in the code.
Do we know what we did when the current zoning code was adopted?
I don't know about the current, but the last big change to a zoning code that we did while I was here was at final BOA, if I remember correctly.
It was the final BOA.
BOA does grant some rights, and there is an expiration date tied to it, which is what the manager was saying.
There's no way to check 2007?
That's what's in the
2001?
code today, which is the 2007 code.
No, I'm saying there's no way to check to see what we did back then in 2007 and 2001. I mean, is there anything we could
If the
check?
comment is that the preliminary BOA grants you rights to be able to continue the process to gain final BOA approval within a certain period of time, that would make sense to me. But the city does not allow you to go to DRC unless you're ready and it's been reviewed. The city will not let you go to preliminary BOA unless it's ready and it's been reviewed. And if what the city's saying is, once you achieve your preliminary BOA review, then it vests you in the process to continue to get your final BOA review, I could see where that makes sense. And I don't, because they're different gatekeeping there to go to DRC or go to preliminary BOA, you know,
No,
I-
it has to be BOA.
I don't think the danger's there necessarily to people to run to BOA, that's for sure. Devin and Ramon do a good job at vetting the project.
Mayor, in any event, I believe this is only about one project that Mr. De Jure is representing. I think we can handle that within the process that we're dealing with. That project is already being reviewed by Board of Architects, so it's way, way along the way.
Okay.
If we could go back to the, if you would like to go back to the things that were going to be excluded. I think the crash section was clear. I think that the issue with Miracle Mile is also fairly clear in my mind. You're only intended to exclude the TDRs, right?
I mean, let me be clear. First off, I agree with Commissioner Mena that I would like to see this bifurcated. But if Commissioner Keon, you know, thinks that the commission is in favor, because we're only two individuals, and she'd like to move forward with a resolution. She'd like,
Well,
excuse me, not a resolution, a motion. I welcome the motion. Again,
The
it's
reason
just two of us that have
I'm
voiced our opinions.
bringing this up is we prepare a memo with about 11 different points, and I don't think those 11 different points are controversial. I think only the TDR was the
Yeah,
issue.
the only issue with the mile that is at all controversial is the issue of TDRs. And Ramon can tell you, and is Liz here?
Oh, but it's,
Is
but they're all ingredients in the same pie, right? Like the remote parking, he's saying he's comfortable with it if this.
The
So
only,
you can't
the
just
only
separate
issue,
the one thing. Is
Okay, the only issue that seems to be an issue is the issue of the TDRs. And I will tell you, and it's because of FAR. But both Ramon will tell you and Liz Plater-Zyberg will tell you that when height is set and setbacks are set, FAR at 70 feet is not material. Is that true?
No, it's not.
Could you just, could you
My
I think Ramon.
let him finish?
Let's be clear. We've already discussed this. No matter how many times you spin it, you're still going to get to the same answer. And that is, when height is set and setbacks are set, that's why I said 45 feet with a 10-foot step back, and you set the FAR at 3.5, almost 1.0 less FAR than would be allowed if you included TDRs, your massing is reduced.
But guys.
That's the bottom line.
But
So there's no, we've already talked about this, and that is critical to put on the record. So you can frame it any way you want.
Commissioner, yeah, but I just want to really, and I don't want to interrupt you. If you want to have the discussion, fine. I think you made that point last time. The only point I'm trying to make to you is, I think what the vice mayor is saying, and I understand it on some level, is if I'm not getting approval on this TDR issue, then I don't support remote parking, right? Because it's all part of the same pie, is what he wants to
may
look
choose
at
to
Miracle
say
Mile and say, this is what we want to see on Miracle Mile, which makes sense to me.
Me too.
So you can't approve, 10 of the 11 elements and then just discuss the 11th, and then you
Right,
neg that,
but
and
I
then.
think the
Commissioner
only.
I don't mean to put words in your mouth. I'm
Listen,
just trying to.
Commissioner,
Okay, but I
with all
don't
due
think that
respect,
there has been any, I don't think there's been a difference of opinion on the remote parking. I think we know that in order to develop what you want to do, you have to have remote parking. So I think that's all agreed on. I think the heights have been set. That's been a long-standing height, so we're not changing the height. There isn't really anything that we're doing, and the only thing that came up was the issue of TDRs. And I said to you, because TDRs are conditional use anyway, before someone could actually use TDRs, they would have to come to the commission for approval for their project. Now, I can't tell you going forward over the next 20 years or the next between today and the next time somebody reviews and rewrites this code, whether or not there may be a reason, or it may be you may have an architect or someone that is designing a building where that additional FAR provides for a better building. I don't know that. So it's not something I would take away because it's already regulated. It's already regulated. You have to, before, even if you have whether it's on the mile or anywhere in the CBD, to transfer development rights, you have to come for the project has to come before the commission. So why would I deny somebody an opportunity to do something that may be of value when I'm going to have the opportunity to review it regardless? That's my only point.
I will answer.
It's not that it's good, bad, whatever. It's that you're going to have the opportunity to review it no matter what. And particularly, buildings where you start transferring, where it really makes a difference with TDRs, are very big buildings, and very tall buildings is where you really have massing. So if you're going to worry about massing, it's not on small buildings. It's on tall buildings. And these are not tall buildings anyway. So it's, give them the tools, give them the opportunity to develop, to have good architecture and good design and workable buildings that are sustainable.
And having to do with remote parking.
So that's why, we've already agreed on
Nobody
remote
in his
parking.
right
We've all
mind
agreed
would
on
want-
remote
So
parking.
why
So the only issue to me
So make
is
the motion.
TDRs.
Make
Is
the
that
motion.
all?
So make the motion.
I actually made a motion, I think, earlier, right, to bifurcate the two.
No, but if the commissioner, I'm
Well,
with
but
you.
I'm asking you, if the only issue is TDRs,
I
to
disagree-
bifurcate
I
it.
disagree with you on that, because
Okay, what is
it's not that I
it?
disagree with you on the issue of TDRs substantively. I
Okay.
disagree with you that just because you get an opportunity to review TDRs later, that therefore it's okay to approve everything else. Because again, fine, you might be the lone dog on that issue with the TDR voting no, but now you voted in favor of remote parking and everything else that goes with it, that maybe you wouldn't have voted yes for if you had an answer on the TDR issue up front.
But TDRs.
I disagree.
I'm
I
sorry,
disagree with that. I think remote parking is an issue that,
it's a given.
in Spanish, you say se cae de la mata. You don't want parking platforms on Miracle Mile.
I agree with you on
I agree with
that.
you.
Don't.
No one's
But the
disagreeing with you.
particulars of what that remote parking looks like are baked into the equation of what we're approving, and so you have to have a full-fledged discussion of the entire thing.
By the way, just so you know also,
Absolutely. You're right.
you're also, if you look at this, you have, like I mentioned to you before, no building has been built over 6 stories, 5 stories, 4 stories on Miracle Mile. Why? Because you got to build the parking. Look at what you're gifting developers now.
You're
You're
not
gifting them.
You're gifting your city.
You're gifting.
You're gifting your city.
If you would just give me allow 1 second. Listen, Commissioner, let me be very clear. I want to see smaller massing on Miracle Mile. I'm not here working for the developers. We're here working for the residents and for what's in the best interest of our historic downtown. So I know you've been pushing this for a long time to try to get this done, but let me tell you what we're doing on behalf of, by approving this today. By approving remote parking, you're getting remote parking. Now everybody qualifies it. It's a good idea. You're also reducing the lot size requirement, correct? You no longer need to have a lot that's 20,000 square feet to get
Right.
bonuses. Hold on. And number 3, you're also reducing the lot frontage requirement, which 220 Miracle Mile does not meet also by a hair. So we're giving.
Why is your issue 220 Miracle Mile?
We are giving a lot in this issue. We're giving a lot in this rewrite to make sure that certain things happen on Miracle Mile. By reducing it, as was stated by Ramon and stated by Devin, by reducing the FAR, you're reducing the massing. So instead of having a 4.375 applicable FAR, which would only increase the height and maximizing 70 feet and 6 stories, that reduces what habitable square footage we have. So again, if you don't allow them to build, they're not going to build it. And I'm a believer that if you look at other main streets of significant cities in this state and in this country, there's a reason why they have a restriction on height and there's a restriction on FAR, because this is their main drag. This is a historic area. And I would like to see, instead of monolithic buildings that go from one corner to another, and I've already shown you, and I can show you again, if you'd like, of developers that are already looking at the same opportunity to go right across the street where the Barnes & Noble is, a massive site. And if you give it to one, you're gonna have a developer asking, I want the same, and I want to build a massive structure. So this is simple. If you believe that we should give remote parking and allow for TDRs, make the motion. And if you get a second,
No.
we'll take it to a vote.
I'm telling you that TDRs are reviewed anyway.
But we're
And
going-
everyone has anyone not agreed to the concept of remote parking? Has anybody not agreed to that?
We don't agree with your statement about allowing for TDRs. And we're allowed to have our own
Has anybody
opinion.
disagreed?
So make a motion.
Hold on.
I'll move it as written.
No, hold on. Commissioner Mena has a motion on the floor. We need to
I'm
take that
sorry.
motion first.
I'd like to see if we get support for this.
My motion was to bifurcate A, issues relating to Miracle Mile within this zoning rewrite, and B, the craft section issue, again, however you describe that within the zoning maps of this rewrite. And then still vote on them today on first reading.
I'll second that motion.
I don't understand what you mean by that. That you're going to vote on it, yes, today, but before it comes back for a second reading, you want an additional discussion on that item? Is that
No,
what
they're
you're saying?
breaking it into 3 ordinances.
Correct.
I think what Commissioner Mena's trying to do is, maybe you're not ready to decide on the TDRs yet. Maybe you are. Maybe you're not ready to decide exactly what you want to do with the MX1 in that craft district. Maybe you are. Voting them now to move forward with all 3, but bifurcated, reserves the option of being able to vote against one of them on second reading without having
Correct.
to send everything back to first reading.
okay.
Or some
Well,
of it.
and again, I just think, these are, again, 2 major areas in our downtown, Miracle Mile in particular, of significant public interest to our community, far and above everything else in this zoning code rewrite,
Well,
in terms of public interest, in my
oh,
opinion.
public interest, yes.
Right. And so
I agree with you on that.
I think it should stand on its own merits, as its own ordinance that gets dealt with, and that you can get public comments on and whatnot, as a standalone item. I think it merits that. It's too significant an issue to me to just throw in with, all of these other issues in the zoning code rewrite. It's not a minor thing. This is significant.
I don't have a problem with that.
And agree or disagree, we're still gonna vote on it.
For all
That's
intents
fine,
and
but-
purposes, the Crafts District, for all intents and purposes, was bifurcated last week, or last time we were here, it was already bifurcated, right?
Right. That's
consolidated for
Well,
this
that was,
meeting.
that was a comp plan ordinance, which is
That's a
different than
comp plan.
zoning, but
That's
yes.
a comp
I
plan
think we're still
revision.
going to,
And
They
I would
can
like,
take a different road easily.
Commissioner Forrest, and I would like to leave here today with a set in stone date to have that sunshine meeting to talk about the craft section. I mean, I think it's important. We can't stress that enough. I want to see that. I'm ready to vote on that issue because I know exactly what I want. I want to see a transition. Now, Miracle Mile, I think, again, I'm willing to open this up to the community. I want to hear what the residents, if they believe that this community, our downtown, should have that size buildings.
A motion has been made.
They
and
already have
seconded.
the right to have a 70-foot
Hey,
building.
guys, a motion has been made and seconded to bifurcate this, to live another day and, discuss it some more.
Okay, is that by, like,
And it was
you'll approve
seconded.
it today on first reading, but before it comes back on second reading, you have to do them as separate items? Is that what
On
you're saying?
bifurcating it now
Oh,
and voting on 3 items.
oh, okay.
The rewrite as it pertains to Miracle Mile, the rewrite as it pertains to the craft section, and the rest of the rewrite. Does that make sense to staff, what I'm asking us to vote on?
Yes.
Okay? It's been made and seconded. Will you call the roll, please, Billy?
Commissioner Mena,
So what do we,
Yes, sorry.
Commissioner Forrest,
Yes.
Commissioner Keon,
Yes.
hold on, he just turned that, right?
Vice Mayor Lago,
I want to be very clear.
This is just to bifurcate.
This is the bifurcate, yes. I want to be clear.
Mayor Valdez Fowley.
Yes. All right.
Okay, then I'll make a motion to approve everything in the proposed rewrite on first reading, except the two items that have been bifurcated, which are the Miracle Mile issues and the craft section.
I will second that.
Okay, will you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Forrest,
Yes.
Commissioner Keon,
Okay, yes.
Vice Mayor Lago,
Yes.
Commissioner Mena,
Yes,
Mayor Valdez Fowley.
Yes. Commissioner? We passed.
I'd like to make a motion to move everything else.
well, it's two items. You need to move one at a time.
Oh, we did it. Thank you. Thank you
No,
very
we
much.
did, did we vote on
You
first
still have
reading on
Miracle
everything
Mile.
else?
There's still two more items.
We voted on everything else but those two. Yes,
Miracle Mile has not been adopted on first reading.
Correct.
Craft section has not been adopted on first reading.
right.
Okay.
Everything else has.
I'm willing to make a motion on the craft section. To
As am
approve
I.
it, to approve it. Again, we will have a sunshine meeting at the commission's discretion when they're available. I know everybody's very complicated. I don't want to rush this. If we can't have this by the next meeting, and someone is complicated for one reason or another, then we'll go to the next meeting. Okay, but I want to have staff prepared as they always are, but I want real details in regards to transitions on Lejeune. Okay, elevations, massing. I'm looking at Devin, who knows this. I've been dealing with Devin for 15 years in the city of Miami. He knows more than anybody how to do this, and so does the ACM and the CM.
Right.
That's what I would like to see. Do I have a second on that motion?
I'll second that.
Second.
Will you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Keon,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Lago,
Yes.
Commissioner Mena,
Yes,
Commissioner Forrest,
Yes.
Mayor Valdez Fowley.
Yes. Okay.
I would like to, okay, so what are we going to do with Miracle Mile? We're not going to vote on it?
You can make a motion. Make a motion.
I would vote to adopt it as it's included in the zoning code, because the only issue that seems to be of any controversy is the TDRs, seems to be the only issue. And I think they are conditional use, and they will come back to us anyway, so you're going to have to approve them, you know, separately, no matter what,
Motion
if
has been
somebody
made.
wants to do them. And, you know, other than that, there isn't, I think everything else is pretty much, the height is by right now anyway.
Is there a second to Commissioner Keon's motion?
yes, I'll second.
Okay, will you call the roll, please?
Vice Mayor Lago,
No.
Commissioner Mena,
Yes on first reading, but I'm gonna have some comments for a second.
Commissioner Forrest,
I'm going to go yes on first reading, which should not be viewed as an indication of
All
a
right.
vote on second. I'd like to hear
Yes.
more from staff on the TDR concept.
Okay, yes,
Commissioner Keon,
yes.
Mayor Valdez Fowley.
Yes, on first reading.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I have a question to ask? Commissioner Lago, you keep bringing up 220 Miracle Mile. What is 220 Miracle Mile?
220 Miracle Mile is a project that was submitted, which in my opinion was way out of scope and scale with what I think should be permissible on Miracle Mile.
Okay,
The height, you asked me a question, I'd love to
go
answer you.
ahead,
if you
finish.
would- But if
No,
not, I mean, I'd love
please
to.
finish? No, please finish.
No, please. I'm used to it already. Go ahead.
No? Me too. Go ahead.
Can
Go
I
ahead.
interrupt?
Okay, so my point is that, listen, very clearly, the project does not meet the remote parking needs. The project was 90-plus feet, almost 100 feet in scale. The FAR was above what was permissible by the code. They were asking to do the alley. It was just not within the context of what I think makes our city special. It is a massive project on our main drag, on our historic drag, where, again, the reason why we have the zoning code here, you may differ, but the reason why we're here today is because there has been an internal push to get this project pushed of epic proportion like I've never seen. And to me, I don't have an issue with remote parking, but let's be honest with ourselves. You have pushed for this project since the beginning over the last 2 years, and I've pushed and pushed and pushed to the extent that you have actually even attended a planning and zoning board meeting to make sure that this gets rammed through.
I didn't.
You know, and I have the minutes here where you did. So I've never attended a planning and zoning board. I've never attended a meeting. And to me, it's excessive and extremely heavy-handed, where we need to be very careful because we do not. And I hate to remind you, you don't work for the developers. You work for the residents.
Okay, but let me.
Okay,
let
you
me-
know what?
Let's finish this, but
Yeah,
let me make
okay.
a comment.
What I am saying,
You asked me, so I answered you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, you did.
I would like
What
to
you were
make,
saying is that you are using a project that was proposed, that never went through any particular review, that never, and no one ever voted on, no one ever talked about, other than a particular developer. A particular developer was Terra Nova. That they came in, they
project are
presented
you
it,
talking about
which
here?
is their business, but it's not a project that was ever approved.
What
It never-
project are you, what
220
project?
Miracle Mile. She said it didn't go to review.
I just want to understand, sorry, guys. sorry.
220 Miracle Mile.
This is.
It was the hotel on,
Okay.
it was Terra
Okay.
Nova's project.
Gotcha.
That was, a submission, so
But it didn't
anybody
pass. It
can
hasn't
sit,
passed.
it's
Okay, let me-
irrelevant.
Mayor, may
And
I
we
say some- may I
don't,
say
no,
something?
wait, no, let me finish. Because it is not our job, and it is not our purpose to write or rewrite or pass or to enact a policy that is directed at one specific person, one specific development, one specific anything. It is to pass policy that works in general for the city. And it is not our job to target anyone, not to target a developer, not to target a architect, not to target anybody. And I didn't go to the Planning and Zoning Board meeting. I listened to the Planning and Zoning Board meeting because I think it was remote, so it was on Zoom. I listened to it, and the reason that I listened to it is because there were a lot of questions as to why were we doing the zoning code rewrite. And so I listened to it to hear what staff were saying, and then finally someone asked me why, and I said, the issue of mixed use was not a topology that we had in the city, that we had multifamily and we had commercial. And to go to mixed use, you had to go through commercial, which we all experienced, takes away all of it changes the height requirements, the density requirements. It really was a very difficult thing to deal with. And
Okay.
so it was those other items were, it was the MX is really what was to develop MX and clear up the site specifics and to deal with items that were previously not dealt with in the prior rewrite of the code in 2007, I think it was. So those were the reasons it was done. It wasn't for anyone's business. And you know what? I don't think we're here to target anybody here. We are here to work on behalf of a community. And I think that
Of
is
course.
a terrible allegation.
Mayor, if I may.
Please, but let's make it brief.
I'd like, please.
Please.
Mr. Trias. Commissioner Keon says this hasn't gone through the process, hasn't been reviewed. What boards has this been to?
I'm not prepared to talk about the projects, so I don't.
But it has been to boards, right?
Going through my recollection, I think it went to Board of Architects.
Okay, so that's pretty significant. That's number one. Number two, you said you didn't speak at the Planning and Zoning Board meeting, and I'm not an attorney. I'll leave that up to the three gentlemen on the commission. July 29th, 2020. Here are your words. Speaking about the zoning code, pushing it on 3 different pages. You spoke, and you spoke extensively. I have nothing else to say about this issue.
On that
No,
item?
please.
like to
Let's not
review
get
it.
into an
Thank
argument
you.
of who said what.
No,
Come on.
Right.
So let's move on to the next
Let me say
item.
something. I would like to challenge the commission. I'd like to issue a challenge. Vice Mayor Lago and some of us have said Miracle Mile and historic and how wonderful, and compared it to Rodeo Drive and compared it to Worth Avenue. I'd like to challenge all of us to go down on both sides of Miracle Mile and count the empty stores. Miracle Mile is in deep trouble, and unless we do something to stimulate Miracle Mile, it's going to go down like the Coral Gables Country Club went down, and like other places that have become obsolete. It's competing against, well, Merrick Park, City Center, the shopping centers everywhere. Miracle Mile is sick, and I would like to challenge you, and I will ask you each personally, have you counted the empty stores? because Miracle Mile is in trouble and we have to do something to help it.
I agree. I would just say to keep that in mind as we approve broad swaths of zoning that would bring significant amounts of additional commercial retail to the downtown area. That will only make it harder for Miracle Mile and its tenants to compete.
Thank you. Let's go on to item I, 4 Smart City Technology Collaboration Projects.